Linder is a global events company that started as Rebecca Linder's vision for a new kind of event management company, one that moved beyond event production to provide creative strategy, knowledge, and leadership to turn an event blueprint into inspirational reality for each client. Learn more about Linder Global Events at linderglobal.com.
Are you a
9, 8,
Okay, so we're gonna
Welcome to GatherGeeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. Here's your host, BizBash chairman and founder, David Adler.
If you're going to listen into a focus group on the ever-changing role of event planners who work inside organizations, then this is the podcast episode of GatherGeeks that will give you insights and takeaways to take to your next team meeting. I recently moderated a panel for EventFluence, formerly known as COPE, the Council of Protocol Executives, that has been around since 1988. The panelists including Jennifer Savica, head of corporate events at New York Life Insurance Company, Maria Donado, director of events at Greystone and Company, the $100 billion real estate financing organization, and Trey Moynihan, special events manager at the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian. The group discusses the relevancy of event organizers at big corporations today, diving into how they become more strategic, ways their jobs have both narrowed and expanded, and how to help the C-suite understand the value of live events, their plans for this year's holiday parties, and much, much more. So please take a listen.
Now to turn to this afternoon's program. My board colleagues and I are thrilled to have with us today the one and only David Adler, better in marketing and event entrepreneur. And in addition to his many professional accomplishments, many of you know him as chairman and founder of BizBash. I was just mentioning to David on a pre-call and reflecting back as I was writing this that David launched BizBash in 2000 as a magazine. That was the first year I started at Debevoise. I've been at Debevoise for 20 years. And I just remember getting that magazine, and I think Maria was mentioning, like, you know, the stacks under, you know, we all had these stacks of BizBash on our desks, and just the excitement of that it like sort of you brought this profession to life through the pages of this magazine, and then it grew, and then it became color, and then it became virtual. But you may not recall, but in those early years, you invited me to a small roundtable lunch for planners, and I just remember being so impressed with you. You asked such compelling questions of the group and really challenged us to think forward and commenting on how our industry was evolving and growing and changing. You're just one of our industry's greatest thought leaders, innovators, an amazing creative force, teacher, storyteller, marketer. We are all really looking forward to having you lead our discussion today. So thank you for being here. And joining the discussion with David is a very esteemed panel. My board colleague, Maria Donado, she's director of events at Greystone and EventFluence Marketing Committee co-chair. Trey Moynihan, who I've also known probably for 20 years as well, who leads events at the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian, and Jennifer Savica, who's vice president and head of corporate events at New York Life Insurance.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. As we've talked about, this is a discussion. And one of the things I found out about doing Zoom sessions and things like that if it can't be death by PowerPoint. So we're going to be interrupting each other. We're going to be looking for questions. We want to make this like you're sitting in your living room, which you are, and talking to your friends. And so that is kind of the tee up of how we want to do it. And the reason I had this conversation, Felice and I had this conversation of what should this be today? And it actually got me thinking about the relevancy of event organizer in big corporations today. I believe that with what's going on today, and people working remotely, that even just going to whatever the office is an event now. Just everything about the world that we're in involves event thinking because everything is up in the air. And so I think that the event organizers have to pivot a little bit into be the culture managers for companies. when you think about it, and I said this earlier at our pre-call, that we kind of run the Underground Railroad. We kind of know everybody, right? And so how do we take that knowledge and make it more valuable for the C-suite people in our companies and clients and things like that? So I want to challenge you to see how your roles can change and how you can be even more important than ever than just doing the assignment. And how do you be more strategic? So I wanted to start with Jennifer in terms of, and we'll just go around. Everybody we had the pre-call, and we could have been on for 5 hours, right? And how you see your role changing, and is it changing? And are you being recognized by your organizations for what you do? So Jennifer, do you want to start also?
Sure, thank you. And so it's great to see so many familiar faces. So hi, everybody. Yeah, I think the role is going to change. It is changing. I've been at New York Life Insurance Company for about a year now, and I walked into a very traditional company who had a certain way of doing things. They knew exactly what they want. Everybody was an event planner. And, with COVID, I think it breaks the opportunity wide open to have a different seat at the table, because now we are truly seen as the subject matter experts, because people don't know what they don't know, and the way of doing things has changed so drastically. And so the types of conversations that I'm in now versus the conversations that we were in before are definitely much more forward-looking, much more, what can we be doing? How can we be getting in front of this? What things should we be eliminating? And I also think, and we were talking about this as some of you were gathering on the call, it's a way to reinvigorate things that were stale. So if you've always done something a certain way and you can't get management or your internal business partner to change the way you're doing it, now's the time. And so there's silver linings everywhere and low-hanging fruit. It's just a matter of seizing the opportunity differently.
And what have you seen that was practical, that really changed since COVID in terms of your role? Is there any questions that you got, or things that you were surprised by senior management that they came to you and asked you about?
Well, they're like, so what do we do? Like, how do we get programs?
They're looking for you.
What do we do? Like, that's the real question I'm getting is, what do we do? So instead of them already having a formulated opinion, or maybe they talked about it in a room that I wasn't in, now it's, what do we do? And across the board, because nobody's ever lived through anything like this. And when you're dealing with events, and especially at my company, the events are the epicenter of the culture. Like, the things that we do are traditional and historied, and they don't know what to do now. They're like, how do we maintain this feeling? How do we not take a gap year? How do we continue? We don't know. What ideas do you have? So that's really allowing us to flex our creativity muscles in a way that maybe we wouldn't have because we were working inside of a certain construct.
So we're going to come back to you and ask you the answer to that question in a minute. But let's go to Maria. And how has your role changed, and how have you seen your company become more strategic and you taken more seriously in your role?
Sure. Well, I think what happened was when March came around, with everything paused. And we all went through that traumatic stage of cancel everything. We have to kind of take control back and kind of undo everything we had been planning that was going to move forward for the next 6, 9, 12 months. And we kind of went through that traumatic phase of kind of unraveling everything that we had been planning. And when we had done that for a couple of weeks, it was like, all right, well, we can't move forward because we're kind of in this standstill. So what do we do in the meantime while we don't have anything to work on? And my firm hadn't necessarily been ready to go dive into virtual yet. They were still kind of in this traumatic stage, but they knew that they had to get in front of clients, they had to get in front of employees, they had to communicate in some sort of way. And what we were able to do was say, all right, you're not ready to talk about events yet, but our skill set just in these areas of being able to touch clients, being able to touch employees, just being able to be the connectors can help you in a non-traditional way. So can we bring a channel a marketing channel that maybe you don't utilize typically to the forefront? Direct mail is something that, how many people have a direct mail channel a person dedicated to direct mail now. Nobody anymore. So all of a sudden our team was helping with all these client mailers through promotional items and helping to communicate in a way that we never had before. Or we were helping with employee morale, trying to make these work from home kits or these safety. So we were doing half events and still doing our regular jobs, but while we're waiting for the firm to catch up and be ready for that next step and guide them to that virtual world, we were pivoting and filling that time with other meaningful ways to communicate with our clients.
Can you give everybody a little background on your company first, and so that they understand the scale, and then I want you to go into a little bit about, was it proactive on your part that you said, or was it, did they come back to you? It's kind of like we had before, where they said, what do we do now? And it's sort of funny that we're the people that get that question.
Yeah, well, so Greystone is a financial services firm that primarily services the commercial real estate industry. And so we work hand in hand our events team sits within our marketing team, and we're a pretty small group in general. So we're all hands on deck no matter what. And so within this time, being a small group, we are always constantly speaking with our business leaders about what their sales goals are, how we can support them. And so it's not necessarily you sit in your silo at any point in the year. So we're always going to sit at the table and be that, leader as a marketing leader beyond our channel. So it was more so they came to us with what they needed, saying we need to constantly be in front of our client in this time of need. What's the best way to do it? So we had to come up to them and say, here are ways that you can touch your client while they're sitting at home. So we did proactively go to them, and in response, they had said, yes, we want to explore these types of options. With HR, they did come to us and say, we want to be able to send our employees masks. We want to be able to do that. And then through our vendor contacts, obviously, we have all these promotional item vendors that we were able to touch and source.
And everybody's working remotely now, pretty much?
Yeah, our whole firm nationwide is remote. They're slowly starting to open up offices on a comfort basis. So if an employee, if the office is able to open and an employee would prefer to work in the office, it is their choice, but nobody is forced to go to the office. It's if they would like to.
And how many people in the firm?
That's a tough question. So our financial services portion, which is what we support, is probably about 1,200, but then there's a whole nother healthcare division that our team doesn't necessarily support.
And you think that the C-suite folks are giving you the recognition now that you reserve? I used to always say that for years the event industry was sitting at the children's table for Thanksgiving, and now we're sitting next to the CEO, if not, his partner in some cases.
I'd like to think so. I think that we have, especially in the past couple of years, have proven our value in a different way. So I'd like to think that they think of us beyond just party planners, and that they understand that we are a partner to reach whatever strategic goals that they set forth.
Do they have a culture officer? Is there somebody that's in charge of culture at your company? Or is that a role of the future?
I think that role unofficially does fall within HR, more so in our head of talent, but not necessarily somebody that's dedicated to culture, as I've seen in other places.
Do you see your role in the events? I mean, my whole premise is that the event people are going to come and overtake and become the culture officers in many cases. Is that premise crap, or is that actually valid?
I think no matter what, we have a deep hand in a lot of these types of areas, whether it's culture or any type of employee initiative, because they lean on us to help execute. and we know how to create those touch points and bring them to life. So they may come to us with their goals, but we're the ones that really bring it to that finish line and bring it to fruition.
Right. Let's move on to Trey. Trey, we've known each other a long time. How has your role changed? You're involved in this small little museum that has no reputation whatsoever. And how has your role changed, and what is the mission, and has your job changed, and how do you see it changing in the future?
Okay.
A lot of questions.
That's a lot of questions.
I just want to turn you on and talk.
No, that's fine. I can answer most of them. I would say first, let me just say that the National Museum of the American Indian actually is a museum. And I think that because we are a museum, we automatically felt the burn faster than a lot of other organizations, except maybe restaurants. And hospitality in general, because what we do is physical. It means we have general visitors literally 364 days a year. The only day that we're closed at the Smithsonian is Christmas. So there was an immediate lockdown, and 75% of the workforce went to teleworking. Now, in some ways, I would say that my personal job narrowed significantly because we have a gorgeous facility in Lower Manhattan, which is used frequently for external events, and I head up that program. But we also do a fair number of our own internal programming and cultivation events, which I also oversee. And it became immediate. We have a team of 5 people who run events for NMAI, and it became immediately apparent to all of us that pivot wasn't the word. We had to change our trajectory completely to focus immediately on what we could do first to help our organization stay focused on its mission, but also work on the internal portions and programs that we were doing to facilitate them in a way that would make the museum feel comfortable to focus on what they could do in the future. And I would say that the thing that really helped me personally, and I think many of the people that I work with in events, is that flexibility is key to whatever we do anyway. So for us to actually change on a dime and figure out, okay, what are the things, where are the problems, where are the gaps, how do we fill them? That's basically how we think on a regular basis. So it was nothing for us to suddenly change and shift into a new way of thinking. That part was the easy part. The hard part was the learning curve. And there was a considerable one. And I think we could all say that. I mean, how many times have you been on mute and didn't realize it? So that alone, that took a couple of days to figure out, but you still have to be reminded occasionally. So I think that the one thing that is very clear to me is that while my job is narrowed, it's also broadened. I feel extremely excited. I think it was Deborah who said earlier in our conversation before this started that she was excited about what's happening. And I am too. I find myself challenged in a way, in the way that I think about how we find touch points for people, how we reach out to people, how we build audiences. It's actually a very interesting time in that way, anyway.
Can you give us some actual examples of some of the things that caused you agita, that caused you to say, holy shit, what are we going to do now?
Well, I wouldn't say agita, but I would say that there was, what can we do to solve a problem? And the first obvious problem was communications. We were lucky in that the Smithsonian had done great work already in trying to enhance the telework experience for a lot of its employees. And most employees who had telework agreements as part of their jobs were already prepared a little bit But what they had done was they had also allowed us to have a platform that allowed us to communicate with each other immediately. We didn't go on Zoom first. We went on another platform. And with that platform, we were able to communicate with each other in ways that we had never communicated before. So in some ways, the fact that we were no longer in the same location, that actually made us collaborate better, because we could see and talk to each other on a regular basis, even if that person was in a different city.
Was your role, though, in helping people do that? Did you get involved as you had to step in and say,
absolutely. Well, one way we were able to do it is our team created a lot of the team networks that we were collaborating in. We also were able to learn how to facilitate programs that would be internal in the organization. So for instance, the first event we did was an all-staff meeting, and it was all virtual. And the entire events department were involved in it. And it did cause a little bit of agita, because the first thing we realized instantly was, wow, this is as hard as a live event. In fact, we may need more people than we usually would need to oversee something like this. We need an event producer. We need someone who can be backup. We need someone who can write the run of show. We need a moderator. I mean, it suddenly became very clear to us, wow, we have so much to learn, and we've got to learn it fast. So that was definitely an interesting change.
So what was the time frame between the actual saying they're going to do it and actually doing it? How fast did you actually learn?
A week.
And you did it. I mean,
and this goes back to what you were saying earlier, is that the idea of the special events team becoming cultural managers. I'm not sure I would put it that way, just because culture in our museum is it's such a significant word. But what I will say is that we were able to do something that everyone felt, yes, this is the direction we want to head in, but wow, how do we do it? Right. And we were able to pull that meeting together, and I'd say it was pretty flawless, actually. Right. And when it happened, everyone said afterwards, wow, we can't believe it. They were able to pull that off. So I think that gave everyone else confidence to be able to do it too. So in that way, we were establishing that our culture, our organization's culture, was one of resilience.
A leading events agency based in DC, Linder has a global footprint. Since their founding in 1996, they have partnered with internationally recognized clients such as the Smithsonian Institute and the iconic National Cherry Blossom Festival to produce and manage innovative and experimental events that don't just engage, they inspire. To learn more about Linder Global events, visit linderglobal.com.
We know in the event business, we know resilience, because at any moment everything can fail. And we just have to pick it up.
The worst case scenario is always at the top of the mind.
You have plan A, B, C, and D. Let's go back to Jennifer. Answer the question. What did you actually do, and how did you inspire your management team to think that, okay, we are really more important than you ever thought?
Yeah. Well, we had to triage pretty quickly, as I'm assuming that everybody else did. And one thing I would note is that this is our 175th anniversary. And so we had hundreds of events planned throughout the country, with the biggest events happening this fall, where we had, multi-million-dollar entertainers booked. We had Madison Square Garden reserved for 2 weeks, every iconic New York venue. And so it was sheer panic of, when we make the decision to cancel, what happens? So, from a triage standpoint, we actually bucketed our programs into, things that could be delivered virtually, things that we knew we were going to have to cancel, and things that were on the fence. And so, I raised my hand proactively and said, all right, well, I'll take this on and I'll come back to you. So then that was another opportunity, again, for them to understand that we were thinking strategically. We weren't waiting to be asked. We understood the seriousness of canceling or potentially canceling everything that the company had worked on, for 5 years to get ready for this anniversary. And so that was the first thing that we did. And then it was the opportunity to speak to internal business partners and really understand, okay, is this something that can be delivered virtually? I mean, I'm sure all of you were doing this as well. Understanding the different platforms, having a conversation with the event team at Zoom. Is Zoom the right platform? Talking to our internal technology people. So it was, I would say, a period of 2 weeks of frenetic conversation and relationship building with people that we didn't even think that we needed to build a relationship with. So, I mean, that's what we did. And we're continuing to do that. I mean, we've not announced everything that we're canceling. We're still trying to figure out, are there ways to deliver certain programs where things don't necessarily replace an in-person experience? What can we do to think outside the box? And I think, and I mentioned this on the pre-call that we had, and some of you may have heard this analogy, and I've been using this quite often. And if one of you said it, please take credit for it, because none of us can remember who said it. But the notion of the Super Bowl, whether you follow sports or you don't follow sports, you're in the stadium watching the game and you get an incredible experience. But if you don't get to go to the stadium and you're at home, you still get a great experience. It's different, but it's still great for the people who are sitting at home. And so how do we get there? So for us, that's the next big tranche, is how do we make it not like everything else? You look into a box all day long, your television, your iPhone, your iPad. How do we make it so compelling that you want to draw them in and keep them there? That's where we are.
Have you figured out any ways to do that yet, that you would advise others?
Check with me in about 3 weeks. Listen, we're trying to figure out how to create a party box where we send something to people's homes that have interactive elements. So if we have a broadcast and they say, okay, now pull out your noisemaker, or we have a broadcast and say, we're going to do a toast and we sent you 2 champagne glasses and a bottle of champagne, or here's the words to, our theme song, Leaders for Life. We want you to do a sing-along at home with your family. Here's some augmented reality. Go outside, look out your window. There's like fireworks that spell out New York Life Insurance Company. So we're trying to figure out how to bring some fun elements of those in-person events that are not based around training, and they're not necessarily as content heavy as the training, but some of those incentive type programs, that's the biggest challenge. Because
do you think that the tactile experience, though, do you see more and more people delivering product to the home so you can be connected to the tactile swag or whatever it is?
I think so. I think so, because how do you differentiate this meeting from the next meeting from the next meeting?
Exactly.
And that's the hardest part. Yeah. Like how do you grab them, keep them? Like that's really what we're talking about.
Is that a big takeaway from what we're talking about right now, that this idea that joining, using the mail? What do you think, Maria?
It has to be because that is one of the biggest elements that makes an in-person meeting, an in-person experience, what it is. And that's what you can't replicate in any other marketing channel. Mm-hmm. You get that look, feel, those senses, and that extra experience that you can't get from any other channel that you can't touch, feel, taste.
But do you think taste is actually, you think F&B is going to be delivered in more concrete ways?
Why not? We know everybody's doing these wine tastings already, and these other, you're delivering food to somebody's home and then teaching them how to cook it. And why wouldn't you have these types of elements intertwined in your corporate experiences and your sales tactics? Mm-hmm. It only makes sense as the next iteration if you're not already doing it.
Trey, where are you on this point?
I think definitely food and beverage is going to be part and parcel of what we do, but I also think that there are other elements that we need to be considering. I think we need to be considering music. We need to be thinking about, I actually just came from a webinar about an hour ago where they had the webinar and then they went to an after event. which I thought was a really cool thing to do. And EventFluence did music in the very first virtual event they did, which I thought was great. And it was unusual music because it was a harp. And I thought, wow, that's intriguing too. I think that there are ways in which you can be compelling and not necessarily be tactile. And I think those are the things that we need to think about as well. And that's going to be much harder.
What are some of the things that you guys have thought of that is compelling? Like I believe that these conversations are pretty compelling if people don't get bored out of their minds. But I think that you have to have a good facilitator.
I'll give you one example. I can't take credit for this particular event because it was based in DC, but we did an event which I was stunned was so popular. We have the National Museum of the American Indian is building a veterans memorial for Native Americans in Washington. And it's under construction right now, and it is set to open later this year. And one of the elements of the construction in the design is a fire element. There is a machinery that's been built to actually create fire, and that would show during certain ceremonies and certain rituals during the memorial's construction and when people view it. We actually had the guys who built the machine come on and do a virtual event. And they literally talked about how this machine was being built, what the fire would look like. They had examples of how they had actually built it, and people were drawn to it. It was the strangest thing I've ever seen. People wanted to know how to build fire. I mean, I guess that's the human condition, but it was great. And I thought, wow, this is really compelling. And I thought, this is the kind of thing that you wouldn't necessarily think about being attractive to an audience. But I think when we're talking about art and programming, we have to think that way.
Well, you notice the art part is actually what people seem to be drawn to. If you notice, a lot of the big headlines, I was at this, I'm living next to this Inn at Little Washington here in Virginia, and they put mannequins in the tables. It's a Michelin 3-star place. And the fact that they created artwork out of the mannequins. And it occurred to me that art is a big part of what we're trying to do here, that people are, like what you're saying about the understanding things and how things are made and the art of doing it. It seems like there's a more in-depth that people are interested in at this moment.
Exactly.
And the art part of it. But I want to go back to Jennifer for a second and all of you and ask this question. If you're going to have your 175th anniversary, or does the 176th look better? Should you continue doing your plans and work around the constraints, or should you postpone?
Yeah, I mean, we are reluctant to say it out loud. We were going to make our official decision on August 1st, so we haven't communicated anything externally about what we're doing. We actually have precedent to postpone, so for our 100th anniversary, it was right around the time that FDR passed away, and they took 2 years off to mourn. So we have precedent for it. It's something we're struggling with. We've got 2 camps that want to do celebratory virtual events, and then we have one camp that wants that and one camp that says, no, we should postpone. So we're working through, we're helping actually broker those discussions. So that's yet another way that the job is changing, because we can provide all of the financial information of what those implications are, survey information on what we're hearing from our attendees, what's going on industry-wide, is it even possible to hold some of these things? So that's yet another opportunity for us to change the view of the seat that we have at the table.
Maria, what do you think? If you have a big event this year, are you going to postpone, or are you going to carry on?
I think it depends on what feeling you want to portray. And totally irrelevant, I think of Lin-Manuel Miranda and the way that he put out Hamilton on Disney Plus, but decided to postpone the release in the Heights and not put it out on TV. And the decision was made on how he needed each of those pieces of works to be viewed by the audience. he said, Hamilton, it makes sense to see it on your TV or on your own home device, but in the Heights, the way that we filmed it, the way we made it, it is really meant for a big screen, so that needs to be held off. I think we need to look at that lens and say, how does the recipient, how does the audience need to take in this information and look at it in that way?
Trey, what do you think? Are you guys proceeding with the constraints?
For the most part, we are proceeding with a lot of our events in the fall. And from the very beginning, it's been great, though, because the senior management has been most concerned about safety, health and safety of the staff. So once that was established and we started thinking about what events we wanted to keep, most of the events that we have for the fall are going forward. And, the ones that are still in question tend to be the large scale ones, the more complicated ones, but I think the initiatives are still happening. It's just a question of when.
Or how their human gatherings made it happen, but you're going to figure out another way around it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I want to move into one other area. When I was a kid, I did Outward Bound. I don't know if anyone ever did Outward Bound, and there's a lot of survival stuff and things like that. And we studied Shackleton, the guy that created that his boat got stuck in the Antarctic, and he saved all of his crew. And there's all these theories of how he did it. And one of the things that he talked about a lot was, when you're a leader, the number one thing to do is, of course, embrace dissidence and do all the leadership things, but to celebrate everything. Yeah. And so event organizers are really part of leadership in that in order to get through tough situations, you have to celebrate everything. I'm saying in our roles in the event world, we're part of morale and we're part of, dealing with the furloughed employees. How do you bring that thinking and helping in leadership of a company in our roles? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
You want to start, right? Are you guys doing that?
Yeah, it's one of the ways in which we just did something last week. We did a picnic, a Zoom picnic for the staff. And typically this is a picnic that we have every year, and all the staff is invited to come, and we were trying to determine whether or not it could be held again, and we decided to hold it. But this time it was all virtual, and that was actually kind of a cool way to do it. We had to figure out games that people could play. We created break rooms where people could interact with other people that they don't normally interact with, because that's one of the wonderful things about a picnic with all staff, is that you have an opportunity to meet people that you don't normally work with. And we wanted to create that environment again. So I think one of the things that we did was a bingo game, which was based on different experiences that you would have working for the museum. How many of you have been here for 10 years? How many of you have been to all 3 facilities? How many of you have met a sculptor that we showed and had an exhibition for? So those kinds of things were... Yeah, it was actually a really cool way to do it. And it gave us a lot of ideas about what we want to do next for the holiday party.
Well, we're going to talk about the holiday party in a minute. Maria, do you have a comment on leadership? And then we're going to ask everyone what they're going to do for holiday parties this year. Maria, in terms of the leadership role, in terms of how important events are to leadership. Any comments on that?
Oh, well, not to boast about our channel, but of course events are important to leadership. I think more and more we are constantly bring ourselves to the forefront and talking about how we can reinvent ourselves and show at each pivot point how event can tie into what they're doing, where they hadn't even thought about it before. And so it's just about making sure that we're constantly in that conversation and being present to be able to bring that opportunities to the table, because we're obviously, if you're not there and bringing that opportunity, you may be an afterthought. So, and then it'll happen organically where they'll bring you up in a conversation and you've heard about it through 2 degrees of separation, and it'll just become behavior. So
you feel that as in your role that you become more aggressive in giving them ideas because they're looking for it, or is it?
I think, I wouldn't say aggressive, but I think that if you're very thoughtful and you can really show your value, that it'll just resonate. And I'm again, that second, third degree of hearing the fruits of your labor. I was speaking with, the head of marketing the other day, where she's like, the COO was talking about the briefing document that you created for an event, and it came up organically in a conversation that was about something totally separate. And it's good to know that repetitive nature of bringing great value and great product to the table has now resonated with him, that I'm top of mind, or my team is top of mind. And so as long as we keep doing that and showing how great our events and how great of a value we bring, then they'll always know that we're invaluable to the business.
When I said aggressive, I meant the idea of showcasing creativity to know, oh my God, you got to turn to these people, or these guys are competent and they're going to pull it off, and they can pull off.
I think there's got to be a little bit of edge to just remind them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's got to be a little bit.
Jennifer, any comments on leadership? And then I want to go to holiday plans.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think our events, the way we do them at New York Life, I mean, it's a huge platform for leadership to share key messaging. I mean, I always like to, and I've said this before, for those of people on the call I've worked with, I think events are the brand in action, right? And even the culture in action. And I think we're going to miss opportunities to have those in-person experiences. But we're all working towards finding other ways to connect people, and that's what events do. They connect people. So I don't think anyone's found the silver bullet on this yet. We're going to be in it for a long time, and hybrid events are going to complicate things even more. So I think more to come on that.
So let's go into. I asked a question the other day, and had you think about it. Like, what do you do with the holiday events this year? It's a tradition for hundreds of years in companies. You can't necessarily do it the same way because you can't bring people together. How do you create that feeling? And what are your ideas and plans, and how would you advise your company to do it this year?
We are a large company. We don't do one singular.
Or your strategy.
Yeah, we do a lot. So, I mean, it's funny, I had just rewritten the rules before COVID of, what everybody could do and how much they could spend. I'm not even sure from a celebratory standpoint, I don't know how people are going to feel about celebrating. It's pretty clear that most of the people in our company are not going to be physically back in the office until well into next year. So, we haven't gotten as far as, how do we advise people from a strategy perspective. What we've started to think about is how do we start to put packages together that would make sense, whether it's painting parties or things that people could do around charity that are virtual. So it's almost like genres of different things that they could pick up and plop into kind of a holiday experience.
Or is it just money? Or is it something that you're going to showcase your feeling of the company? It's really what the holiday party is about.
Yeah.
And whatever the moment is, I know after 9/11, a lot of people canceled their events and things like that. But you want to show something because it's a moment. So I'm just curious what plans would be. Maria, do you guys have sort of thoughts on that?
So similarly, typically the offices do different things. So it'd be interesting to have a conversation on, for the first time, do we actually do something together virtually to show solidarity and to have that touch point with all of our employees nationwide? So that would be interesting to see if that resonates with our executive team. And so I know you had given us this assignment, and obviously very early stages of thinking. So, but like put a little thought to, like, if I were to plan a virtual event that all of our attendees nationwide came to, what would be kind of like my wish list? And so the 4 things that I thought of, if I were to create some sort of virtual event, I thought I'd want it to have some sort of physical element, like a mailer that would go to somebody's home, definitely a performance, some element of gamification to get people playing something, and then some element of surprise. And not quite sure what that would be, but kind of if I were to be able to have some sort of virtual event that would be national.
I just got a great idea listening to Jennifer. And
That's the whole purpose here.
Well, but part of what's been interesting about what we've been doing is we've been doing a lot of big idea thinking about how the museum can actually, this particular time, really focus on the mission and the vision statement for the museum, which is a cultural one. And I love the idea of doing something with charities. I also love the idea of doing something that's genre oriented. And it made me curious because we have such a creative group at the museum. I want to do a survey. I want to ask them what they want to do because, we're not as traditional as a New York Life. So we have a lot of creative people on our staff who would definitely have an idea about what they'd like to do. So I'm considering that.
As companies, how much do you reach out to your furloughed employees? I mean, because this is a whole area that they're still part of the company. And how do you sort of deal with that? I mean, it's part of your mission too, I assume, because this is an awful thing that's happened.
Yeah.
Do you want to start?
Well, I would say that the people that we've been reaching out to the most are the people who can't telework, because there's such, part of the culture is actually the conversations you have in the hallway and in the staff lounge. And those people are feeling very isolated and lonely. And so we've found ways to reach out to them on a personal level, whether it's sending food or particularly to the essential personnel who still have to work in our physical facilities. We still have artwork there. So our security staff, our facility staff, our collections managers, our IT people go in to the office and have been since March. So those people are the people we reach out to on a consistent basis and offer them help and talk to them and send them food. So yeah, absolutely. We think about that quite a bit.
Yeah. Maria, do you have, how do you deal with this issue?
So we don't have furloughed employees, but similar, we do have, the healthcare division has a lot of essential workers. So a lot of nursing facilities. So they're in working around the clock. We have a property management division that is obviously working around the clock as well. So those are the people that are getting a lot of TLC. So those are the people that are obviously are at the forefront of our mind, making sure that they get some sort of extra attention.
Yep. Similar, we don't have furloughed employees. We have been involved with helping with our essential workers, getting them gift baskets and gift cards and things like that.
Do you guys want to give us sort of a final comment on how you see how your jobs have pivoted and what advice you give to the people that are listening based on some of the things you've already said, but if you have any final thoughts based on hearing everybody else's thoughts, and we'll just do a round robin. You want to start, Jennifer?
I mean, final thoughts are, I think this is a huge opportunity for all of us to change the perception of what we do. If you haven't done that already in the job that you're in, that's where I see the biggest silver lining, and seize the opportunity and don't hesitate to show your value proposition and have people understand what that is in this time as well as in the future.
Maria?
I think that we're in, it's no surprise that we're in unfamiliar territory. So don't be afraid to reach out to colleagues, friends, EventFluence members to just get some sort of advice, venting, and just have some sort of network to talk to, because we're all trying to get through this together and get new ideas and bounce things off of each other. So we got to lean on each other to find new ideas or just be an area of support.
Right.
Out of the box thinking is such an overused phrase, but I keep thinking about it in this context because honestly, I think that this is a time where people who are event planners should be thinking as creatively as you possibly can. There's absolutely nothing that you couldn't potentially do in either a virtual world or a hybrid world that couldn't connect with people. And that's what we do best. We connect people. We build those connections, and I think we can still do that. So I would encourage everybody just to think big.
I think that is a really, really great way to end this whole conversation on the pivot and things like that. I believe that we're in the greatest part of innovation that we've ever seen in our industry. We are being stretched to the limits. And I just did a poster that sailors in calm seas do not get any better at what they do. So we are in very rocky, bad waters. We're in really rough waters right now. And I think that we're hanging on, by our whatevers. And I think you're seeing innovation like nobody's business. The other thing I always preach for event organizers, that you're not really event organizers anymore. You're kind of collaboration artists. You are putting together people and facilitating your companies in many cases. Because as Jennifer said, that we're the arbiters of lots of things that are going on. Because in order to create an event, you got to get consensus on what works and what doesn't. So you're dealing with lots of people. And even in every event that you go to, the person that knows how to facilitate a meeting, that organizes something, that's a skill. That is like the best chefs in the world used to be behind the scenes and they were just cooks, right? Now they're superstars. I believe that collaboration artists are going to be the next level of superstars. And the people in the event departments are those collaboration artists. And I truly believe that. And I think that the idea of being your cultural officer, or whatever you call it, is going to be how you're being seen. I know that when I was at a company called Prime Media, and I was at a company called Macmillan, and ran events and communications, we really did run those underground railroads. We knew everyone. Last time Capricia Marshall was a speaker, and she told me that when she would travel with Barack Obama would wonder, like, why does Capricia know everybody that she's meeting? Because she did, events for the country, and all the other protocol officers were friends with her, and he was able to get anything using her as a secret weapon. So it's really important that we are secret weapons in our firms, and we really know what's going on. So if anybody knows the pulse, you can hire the best outside people to do focus groups. All they should do is ask their event departments, and pretty much everything. So with that, I want to turn it over back to Deborah? Who should I turn it over? Okay.
Well, I'm happy to wrap up here. I know that we didn't have time for questions, but I thought this was such a really amazing conversation, getting us all thinking, because we are responsible for that client experience. I always feel, and this is what our strength is, all of us as planners, right? Is how we're connecting people, how it resonates. And I was even going to say, I think I mentioned this on one call at some point, it's not always also about us making the connections, but making sort of another generation of connections. We had sent puzzle gifts to families of clients. So it wasn't about us connecting with them. It was actually them connecting with their own families, but it made them feel good. And so as you were all saying, thinking out of the box, reimagining, I like to frame it as such an exciting time to take all of this and figure it out. It's really wonderful that you're all part of the event community, that we can figure this out together. And I am and the board, we're hoping to create more of these conversations and opportunities to share our ideas and brainstorm together. It's so great to hear from each of you. Thank you so much, Jennifer and Maria and Trey, for sharing, very honestly, your challenges and your thoughts and ideas, and David for leading us to push us to think, and also to look at our value proposition, as Jennifer put it. I think, we really have something special, those of us who are creating this, and so to remember that and to be able to repackage it and use it in other ways. So I want to thank you so much for coming, and please do share with us your thoughts, your ideas, your feedback, if this is helpful, if you want to see other things, we want to, we're a community together sharing as colleagues with each other. We want it to be valuable for everyone. So please do reach out. Anyway, thank you so much. And David, I hope you'll come back and maybe lead another conversation for us.
Anytime.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the GatherGeeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter at GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of GatherGeeks. Until then, gather on.